Hi everyone, this is Tammy with Shabby Fabrics. Today I have a really fun project. It's camping season and I love this little wall hanging. This wall hanging is called Living the Dream. The fabric is by Clothworks. I love this panel, the blocks that we made. This block looks much more complicated than it really is. This looks like a very complicated twisting star type of block. I'm going to show you how easy that is to make. We're going to use our Fast Flying Geese ruler, and here we go. So let's go ahead and get started. So what I did was I pre-cut my fabrics. I want you to note on the Flying Geese ruler, let's do it on the white. I think you can see it the best. So it's always going to tell you what your finished size is. So we need a 2x4 Flying Geese. So I'm going to follow D. So you follow these instructions. We're cutting your first square to 5 3/4, which I have done ahead of time. And I'm cutting 4 squares to 3 1/4. All right. Then we're also going to use the D lines on the ruler to trim up our Flying Geese when we get it pieced. All right. So let's make this. So here's my 5 3/4. So I have my other squares, and the first thing you're going to do is you're going to draw a line on the back of all of your 3 1/4 inch squares. I like to use a friction pen. You could use a pencil, a mechanical pencil. You can use other things to draw a line. I prefer a friction pen. I am going to be cutting on this line, so it really doesn't matter. The friction is not going to stay in your quilt. All right, so I'm going to draw this line. I like this little ruler. This is the I Love My Quilting Friends. I love these little rulers. I'm using the red one today. All right, so we're going to pin these on, and we're going to put one in the upper corner and one in the lower corner. I'm going to match my lines that are drawn. You see that? They match right here. Okay, so now I need to hold these on there a little bit, but my sewing line is going to be 1/4 inch beyond this point, beyond this line on either side of it. So I want to keep my pins out of my sewing line. So I'm going to put a pin out here in this corner and in this corner. This way it holds onto that square. It's not going anywhere, but it's way away from my sewing machine needle, which I love. I do not like to move pins when I sew. You guys who have watched my videos before, you know I do not like to do that. So I try to keep my pins well away from that sewing machine. All right. The other thing I like to do on Flying Geese, and this is optional, do you see where these two overlap? I like to cut these overlapping points. It's going to help reduce the bulk when you're actually putting your Flying Geese together. So I like to take a nice pair of scissors. I like my Kai scissors. They're nice and sharp. And I'm just going to simply cut this. Whoop. Just like that. All right. You cut that thread. Okay. And just cut that overlap there. You see how they still line up just fine. They're not going anywhere. So now I'm going to take this to the sewing machine and I'm going to sew 1/4 inch on this side. I'm going to turn, I'm going to sew 1/4 inch on the other side. And when I come back, we will trim it, press it, and then I'll take it to the next step. Here we go. Okay. So we got that sewn. I'm going to take my pins out. Before I press this, now I need to cut this, right? So we need to cut this. So we're going to just use our ruler. I'm going to put it right on the line, just like this. Here we go. Oh. My blade has got a skip in it. I may have to change my blade here. Okay, so we're going to do that. Now I'm going to press this, and I'm going to just set this seam, and I'm going to press this to the cream. All right, so let's do that. I love making Fast Flying Geese. This is the most efficient way to make flying geese blocks. Anytime I have a flying geese block in a quilt, I'm like, oh yeah, I'm going to make 4 of those at a time by using this ruler. I just absolutely love this tool. It's probably one of my most well-used tools in my arsenal of rulers, is that. Okay, so now we have these funny looking pieces. So now I'm going to take another square. I'm going to line it up in the corner as before, just like this. I'm going to pin it on this corner, and I'm going to pin it on this corner. All right, now I'm going to start sewing. I'm going to go down and come back, just like I did before. Okay, so we have that sewn. So as before, we're going to remove our pins. And I'm just going to cut this straight in half on my line. Okay, perfect. We're going to take this to the iron and press these out. Now you can see my flying geese. Now what I really like about this ruler is when you're following the directions, these blocks are oversized. So now I can trim them down and they are perfect. They're going to fit in my quilt exactly like I want them to. So let me show you how to do that with this ruler. Okay, so we have a trim 1, which is in this upper corner. And I'm going to trim there first. I'm going to kind of spread my stuff out here. So I'm going to use my spinning mat, and I need to have a clear path so it doesn't run into anything. So trim 1, and like I told you before, we're using D to make a 2x4 flying geese. So on the D line, it's got black and white dash line. That's what I'm going to use. That's my target. So I just line up right here in the V, right there. Now I'm going to cut here and here. I'm going to turn my mat. All right, turn your mat one more time. Now it's upside down. I simply pick up my ruler, slide it down. Now I'm on trim 2, and now I'm using again the black and white dash line. Now I'm lining up. Oh, it's perfect. It's exactly this footprint right where I need it. It hits here, 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 and here. So I know no matter what, this is perfectly lined up. It also tells me again, before I cut, this is a 2x4 flying geese, which is correct. So I'm going to trim this side and this side. Look how perfect that flying geese is. That is exactly a 2.5 by 4.5 or finished 2x4. So let me put my ruler on here, and you can see it's exactly 2.5 by 4.5. Okay, so let me show you one more time. I'm going to trim this through again a second time. Okay, so we're going to follow the D. I'm going to set this in here, line it up, cut, spin, cut, spin, adjust my ruler, cut, and spin. You can see how efficient that is and how quickly you could cut through a stack of flying geese. The spinning mat is amazing. The flying geese tool and a rotary cutter, perfect. All right, so now the other part of this block, let me set these up here for us. We've got our finished flying geese. Now the other part, and I'm going to back up to show you, is this flying geese. This is a flying geese when you look at it. However, one of the points is blue and one is cream. So doing 4 at a time is not going to work because of the way that the squares go on these flying geese. So now we're going to do a flying geese, what I call the old-fashioned way. All right? So Let's do that together. So I'm going to start with a 2.5 inch by 4.5 inch rectangle. These are 2.5 inch squares. I pre-cut them ahead of time. I have one blue and one white, or cream. All right, so our cream one is going to go on this end. Well, you have options here. The first option and most obvious one is to just draw the line like this with a friction pen, right? That's the most obvious way to do it. So on the line and go from there. I want to show you another option if you don't like to draw the lines. This is a folded corner clipper. I love using this tool because it lets me cut and measure in one motion, so then I don't have to mark my flying geese, and then you don't have to come back and trim this corner once you've sewn it because it's already cut. So it really is a time saver. So what I want to do, I'm going to turn it like this because I want my seam to go this direction. This is a 2.5 inch square, so I'm going to use the 2.5 inch mark on this tool, just like this. I'm going to line it up perfectly. It lines up at the bottom. It has a little dark hash mark right here. That is lining up exactly with the edge of my fabric, okay? Now I know I'm going to cut just like this. Now I'm going to go sew 1/4 inch. So I'm going to start here and go here to here, exactly where that line is, all right? So let's go do that really quick. All right, so I used a little starter strip because I was starting on a point. Sometimes when you just go to start sewing on a point, your machine will take that down into the feed dogs and make a big mess. I know you know what I'm talking about. This does happen to me as well. Instead, I use a little starter strip, or there's a lot of names for these little, just a little scrap piece of fabric, sew onto it, you sew right off of it, and then you get a perfect corner and your machine does not eat those corners. All right, so I've sewn there. We're going to go ahead and press this out. I'm going to set my seam and then press this open. All right, so now we're going to put our blue on the other side. In fact, I can use the one with the corner clipper so I can show you that a second time. My blue goes on this side. So I'm going to take my corner clipper. You see how my unit is rotated this way now because I want my seam to go this way. That's one thing you have to keep track of with a corner clipper. You're cutting that fabric away, so make sure that that is the angle that you want to sew. All right? There we go. I'm going to put a little pin in this in the bottom just to hang on to this a little bit in this bottom corner. I'm going to start here and go to the corner. Okay. We're going to press this open. All right, there we go. Okay, let's measure it again like we did the other one. Let's see how accurate we were this time. Ha, it's perfect. All right, 2.5 wide, 4.5 long. That's exactly what I want. All right, so now we're going to join these two together, right? We look back at our block. You have your plaid block here. This one's here. This one's here. And this one is here. Okay? So I want to put these together like this. I'm just going to fold these together, right sides together, and I'm going to put a pin right here in this seam allowance right next to that point where I'm sewing to. And I want you to note that I'm using these fine patchwork pins. I love these pins. They are what I sew with all the time. They don't disturb my seam. So you can see how flat this lays. There's not a big bump there where my pin is, and I like that. I'm also sewing, I'm pinning away from where I'm going to sew. So I want to sew, I want to hit this X that's in my fabric, and I think you can see that where my stitch line crosses. If I make this a little darker with a friction pen, you can see, you see where the X is that I'm going to sew, but I want to sew exactly on that X, and then I know I'm not going to cut my point off on this piece right here. All right, so let's go do that. Okay, so let's see how we did. Now I'm going to press this seam open. The reason I press this seam open is I want this point to be sharp, but I also have to watch out because I have points here and here that I'm going to need to pay attention to. If I fold this seam up, this now becomes very thick and I can't see where that point is. So I'm going to press this seam open, all right? There we go. That's perfect. All right, that's what that looks like. Now I made another one ahead of time, exactly the same. All right. So what I need to do now is I need to join them together like this. Let's put this all together so you can see the final block. Here to here. Okay. So now we're going to make these two one unit. So I'm going to fold this on top. All right. Now, we need to make sure that this point matches this point. I have a trick for that. I'm going to take a pin and I'm going to insert it at the bottom of this point. Right? That's where that goes. And I'm going to set it into the top of this point. And now I can wiggle this around and you can see how that pin is moving when I'm wiggling this. I want that pin to be straight. I want him to be dead on. Ha, that looks perfect. All right, so my pin is straight on. I'm just going to remove the pin and put it in the seam. That's where I want that. Okay, and I got my seam allowance kind of flipped up a little bit right there. Let me repress that a little. There we go. I want him to stay down. We're going to put a pin in this seam allowance to make sure it stays where I want it to. And we can pin again at the end. All right, so note how my pins, this one is out of my seam allowance. This one's out. This seam allowance, however, I pin this up tight to this. So my pin is in my seam allowance. I'm going to sew to the bottom of that point. I'm going to stop and take out that pin. I don't like sewing over pins. All right, so let's go do that. All right, so let's see how we did. Take my pins out. Oh, that looks really nice. So you can see how these points come together exactly like I wanted. Perfect. So again, I'm going to press this open. Pressing open also sharpens your points when you're sewing. All right, let's press these open and then we will sew our final seam and we'll have a completed block already. Perfect. All right, here we go. Just like this. So again, I have 2 times now I have to be careful of my intersections, right? We have this one and this one need to line up, and this one and this one. So I am actually going to use a pin and make sure that these line up, just like I showed you. I take the time to pin my points. I just love points that come out right on where I want them. That makes me happy. So I always take the time to do this. And if they don't come out right on, I have my trusty clover seam ripper, which I use all the time. Trust me, I use that all the time. Just because I sew a lot does not mean I do not use that. Okay, so now I'm going to take my 2 seams in the middle are open. They're very easy to line up. I'm going to stack them on top of each other and pin them. All right, off to the machine we go. All right. Let's see how we did. Oh, that looks really nice. Okay, we're going to press our seams open. And press it again from the front. You know, I love a wool pressing mat when I'm doing patchwork like this. The wool kind of gives way when I'm pressing seams, and the seams kind of fall down into the wool mat. And so it gives you a sharper, crisper seam. I hope that makes sense. But you can see how flat my block is when I lay it on the table. It's very flat. I'm not using any steam at all in this iron. This is a dry iron. I should point that out as well. Okay, perfect. This block looks amazing. The last step, if it's not quite perfect, you can take an 8.5 inch. This is a Creative Grids 8.5 inch square up fussy cut ruler. You can lay this on here and trim on your edges if you need to. I don't need to trim that, so that's good. All right, so that's my block. Fun star, fun flying geese block to make. I hope you've learned some different methods on how to make a block. We use the Creative Grids folded corner clipper and the Creative Grids Ultimate Flying Geese tool by Deb Heatherly. I love this tool. It really is a staple in my sewing room. If you don't have one, you might want to pick that up. And I have a lot of these little fun, I love my Quilting Friends rulers. I love this. It's 2.5 by 6.5. I use this all the time. And of course, I'm also piecing with Aurifil thread and using a Schmetz 8012 needle. That's what I've got for you. So thank you so much for joining me today. I appreciate you being here. I appreciate your time. If you like this video, please give me a thumbs up. Make sure you hit the bell if you'd like to be subscribed and learn about future videos that we are releasing. We'll see you again on another Shabby Fabrics video.